Welcome back to Fundamentals of Programming. This is lesson 13, and in this lesson we will discuss a data type called array. An array is a data type that allows us to store multiple values inside of the array. And it's very helpful if those values are of the same type and if they are supposed to represent roughly the same thing. So I have some code already written. I have 4 variables called name 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they each have a different name: Jeremy, Jeffrey, Jackie, and Jennifer. And then I have 4 calls to console.log that says hello, and then the name contained in name 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, this is rather redundant, and in lesson 12 we discussed redundancy and code repetition and how we could make our code easier to write and maintain using loops. Well, it would be really nice if we could use a loop here, because we are essentially doing the same thing. We are just saying hello to different names. So this is where an array can actually help us, because we can store each of these names inside of an array and then use a loop to iterate over that array and say hello to each of these names. So let's first create an array, and then we will add each of these names to that array. In JavaScript, array is a built-in data type, and every data type or every built-in data type has a literal value. So to create an array in JavaScript, we first create a variable, which I'm going to call nameArray, and then we use the literal value of an array, which is a pair of square brackets. So we have just created an array. It is empty. It doesn't contain any what we call elements, but we can add elements very easily. An element is just an individual piece that is stored within the array, and that element can be a string value, it can be a number value, it can be any other value. It's just one value inside of the array. And each element is at a specific position. And instead of saying position, we use the term index. Arrays begin with an index of 0. This is very important. We don't begin at 1, we begin at 0. So in order to store something at the first position, we do so at the index of 0. So we will do name array, and then we will use what's called index notation, and that is using the square brackets and then specifying the index number inside of the square brackets. So the first position is at index 0, so we specify the number 0 there, and then we add the value that we want to store at this index. So if we want to store the name Jeffrey in the next position, we do so by specifying nameArray, choosing index 1, and then specifying Jeffrey. And we will do the same thing for Jackie and Jennifer. So we'll do nameArray, index 2, that is Jackie, and then nameArray at index 3 is Jennifer. So we no longer really need these variables here because we are storing these values inside of nameArray. So I'm going to remove these variables, but then we need to modify the code that we have within the calls to console.log. Well, that's really easy to do. All we have to do is copy and paste the nameArray and then the index. So not only can we set a value at a particular index by using index notation, but we can also retrieve that value by using index notation as well. So if I paste this in and change these values to 0, 1, 2, and 3, then whenever we run this within the browser, we will see hello Jeremy, hello Jeffrey, hello Jackie, and hello Jennifer. So let's go ahead and run this so that you can see that occurring. We'll pull this up. This is writing to the console, so here we go. Hello, Jeremy, Jeffrey, Jackie, and Jennifer. Now, as you've probably noticed, we kind of had the same pattern that we did in lesson 12. Whenever we were writing a times table, we did so in a sequential order starting at 0. Well, here we are starting at a sequential order starting at 0 and then going to 1, 2, and 3. So really we could simplify this code by using a loop. So let's go ahead and do that. We are going to use a for loop because we are going to use a counter. And this counter I'm going to call II. Now typically we use the value or the variable name of I for the counter of for loops. If you look at a lot of code, you will see var I equals 0. I like to use I because if I need to search through the code for I'm going to find a lot of hits. So if I use I, and if I do a search for then I'm almost guaranteed to always find my for loops that use I as a counter variable. So it really doesn't matter what variable name you use, just as long as you know what it is. So var I equals 0, that is our counter. Next we need our condition. So as long as I is less than or equal to 3, then we want our for loop to iterate, and then we want to increment our counter. So we will do I plus equals 1. And then inside of the loop, we simply want to use console.log. And then instead of specifying the number 3 as this index, we will use the variable I, because that is going to change with each iteration of the for loop, and it's going to be directly in line with the indexes that we've used for our name array. So if we get rid of the rest of these calls to console.log, and we run this in the browser, we will see the same results that we got before, except we did so with less code by using a loop to write the hello message for us. Now, what if we want to add yet another name to our array? Well, the first thing we need to do is name array, set it at a new index, and I have too many R's there. So set the new index at 4, and then set a value. So let's do this name as Joshua. But if we want to display this name in the console as well, we need to modify our condition, because as it is right now, we are only going to 3. We want to go to 4. Well, that's kind of cumbersome, because not only do we have to make the change whenever we are creating the element at index 4, but we also have to change our condition. Wouldn't it be nice if we could only just add a new element to the array and then let the for loop just handle that for us? Well, we can actually do that because arrays in JavaScript are actually objects. And objects, we learned, like the console object, has extra things available for us to use. For example, the log method allows us to write a message to the console. Well, objects have something else called properties. A method does something with that object. A property gives us some information about that object. And array objects have a property called length. So name array dot length, this gives us the amount of elements within the name array. So this is going to return a number of 5 because that's how many elements we have. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are 5 elements. So if we use name array dot length inside of our loop, then we no longer have to modify the condition in our loop. It's automatically going to update for us. Now notice I got rid of the equal sign in the less than or equal to with this comparison. The reason being because name.array is going to return the value of 5. Well, if we iterate this loop, it's going to start at 0, and then it's going to go to 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then it's even going to increment the 5th time. Well, we don't have an index of 5, but since 5 is not less than the value of 5, then that's going to kick us out of the loop. So we don't want less than or equal to, because then that condition is going to be true. And if we try to use the number 5 for an index of name array, we are going to get undefined because we haven't specified anything at index 5. So let's get rid of the equal sign. Let's go back to the browser. Let's refresh, and we can see that we have hello Jeremy, Jeffrey, Jackie, Jennifer, and Joshua. So we can add as many more elements to this array that we want. I added some more. We have a total of 9 elements within this array. And let's go ahead and give these different values. So let's do Joshua 1, Joshua 2, Joshua 3, and Joshua 4. If we run this in the browser, we will see all of these different names listed here. And we didn't have to modify our condition whatsoever. This is why at the end of lesson 12 I said that arrays and loops work really well together, especially for loops, because we can use them to easily iterate over an array. Well, let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's say that we only want to say hello to the names that have an even index. So that's 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. That's really easy to do, even though it kind of seems kind of difficult. We have an operator called the modulo operator. It is a percent sign, and we use it in place of a division operation. What the mod operator does is it gives us the remainder of that division operation. So for example, let's do 4 divided by 2. But instead of doing division, we will use the modulo operator. And if we want to just say mod, we can do that. So this would be 4 mod 2. That's easier than saying 4 modulo 2. So 4 mod 2 gives us the remainder of 4 divided by 2. Well, the remainder is 0 because 2 evenly goes into 4. But if we change 4 to 5, 5 mod 2 is going to give us a non-zero number because 2 does not go evenly into 5. So this is how we can determine if a number is even or odd. If the mod operation gives us a non-zero value, then we know that the number is odd. But if we get 0 as the remainder, then we know that it's even. So we can use that in our condition. We can say if II mod 2 is equal to 0, then we want to say hello to that name. So let's finish this off with some curly braces. Let's tab over just to make things a little bit more readable. And let's run this within the browser. So we should see Jeremy, Jackie, Joshua, Joshua 2, and Joshua 4. Let's go back, let's refresh. And there we go, Jeremy, Jackie, Joshua, Joshua 2, and Joshua 4. If we wanted to get the odd ones, all we would have to do is use the non-identity operator. And that will display Jeffrey, Jennifer, Joshua 1, and Joshua 3. So let's go back. Let's refresh. Jeffrey, Jennifer, Joshua 1, and Joshua 3. And without going too deep into arrays in the JavaScript language, that's essentially all that we pretty much do with an array. Not necessarily store names with them, but whenever we have an array, we typically use a loop to process each individual element within that array. Or we might want to filter it down based upon some criteria, like we did by checking if the index was even or odd. One of the more practical uses of an array is whenever you're writing JavaScript within the browser. Let's say that you wanted to retrieve all of the anchor elements within the page. Well, the browser gives you the tools to select all of those elements. And whenever you do, you get something that's like an array. And then you want to process each one of those anchor elements, and you do so by using a loop. So that's going to end today's lesson. In the next lesson, in lesson 14, we are going to learn how we can write our own functions. Up to this point, we have used functions that have been provided for us. So getting to write our own functions just opens the door for writing more complex and more robust applications. So I will see you then. Have a good one.